Picture this. You're walking home from work on an ordinary Tuesday evening when you witness something that makes your blood run cold. A high-ranking military official is being attacked by armed men in broad daylight. Your instincts kick in, and without thinking, you step in to help. In that split second, you become a hero who saves a life. But what if that single act of courage puts a target on your back? What if the very person you saved becomes the reason you can never feel safe again? What if helping someone reveals secrets so dangerous that powerful people will stop at nothing to silence you forever? Sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price nobody warns you about. Sometimes being a hero means becoming hunted. And sometimes the person you save might be the only one who can help you survive what comes next. This is the story of Marcus Chun, an ordinary software engineer whose life changed forever the moment he decided to be brave. It's about how one choice can turn your entire world upside down, and how the line between hero and victim can disappear in the blink of an eye. Marcus Chun never imagined that stopping for coffee would change his life forever. It was 6:30 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday in downtown Seattle, and he was walking back to his apartment after another long day debugging code at the tech company where he worked. The streets were busy with the usual evening crowd. People hurrying home with their heads down, umbrellas bobbing like black mushrooms against the gray sky. He had just stepped out of his favorite coffee shop, steam rising from his cup, when he heard the screech of tires followed by angry shouting. Most people quickened their pace, wanting no part of whatever drama was unfolding. Marcus paused, his programmer's mind instinctively drawn to problems that needed solving. 3 men in dark coats had surrounded an older gentleman near a black sedan. The older man was distinguished-looking, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of upright posture that suggested military training. He was holding a briefcase tightly to his chest while the 3 men demanded something from him in voices too low for Marcus to make out the words. Marcus noticed something that made his stomach drop. One of the attackers had his hand inside his jacket, clearly gripping something that wasn't meant to be seen. The older man's face was pale but determined, shaking his head repeatedly at whatever they were demanding. "Sir, is everything okay over there?" Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the busy street. Several passers-by glanced in his direction with expressions that clearly said, "Mind your own business." The 3 men turned toward Marcus, and he could see the calculation in their eyes. They were professionals, he realized with growing alarm. This wasn't a random mugging. The way they positioned themselves, how they scanned the environment, the coordinated nature of their approach. Everything screamed organized operation. "Walk away," one of them called back, his voice carrying an unmistakable threat. "This doesn't concern you." But Marcus had already seen too much. The older gentleman's eyes met his across the distance, and in them Marcus saw something that hit him like a punch to the gut. Genuine fear, but also hope. Someone was finally paying attention. Marcus pulled out his phone and started recording, making sure his actions were visible. "I'm calling the police," he announced loudly, hoping other people would hear and maybe step in to help. The reaction was immediate and violent. One of the attackers broke away from the group and started moving toward Marcus with purposeful strides. The software engineer's fight-or-flight response kicked in, and surprisingly, he chose fight. "Hey!" Marcus yelled at the top of his lungs. "Someone call 911. This man needs help." His shouting had the desired effect. Other pedestrians stopped and started looking. A few people pulled out their phones. The attackers realized their window of opportunity was closing fast. In the confusion that followed, Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for months to come. Instead of staying at a safe distance, he ran toward the group. His plan was simple: create enough chaos and witnesses that the attackers would be forced to retreat. What he didn't expect was for the older gentleman to break free during the commotion and run straight toward him. "Take this," the man gasped, pressing a small device into Marcus's hand as he rushed past. "Keep it safe. They cannot have it." The device was about the size of a flash drive, but heavier, made of some kind of dark metal that felt warm to the touch. Before Marcus could ask any questions, The older man had disappeared into the crowd that was now gathering around the scene. The three attackers regrouped quickly. One of them spoke rapidly into a phone while the other two scanned the crowd, clearly looking for their target. When their eyes landed on Marcus, still standing there holding his coffee cup, and the mysterious device, their expressions changed. They had a new target. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what had just happened. The man had passed whatever the attackers wanted to him, without knowing it. He had just become part of whatever dangerous situation was unfolding. The smart thing would have been to drop the device right there and walk away. But something in the older man's desperate eyes had struck a chord with Marcus. Plus, the attackers had threatened him, and his stubborn side wasn't about to be intimidated by bullies, no matter how professional they looked. Marcus slipped the device into his jacket pocket and started walking quickly toward his apartment. Behind him, he could hear sirens approaching, and he hoped the police would arrive in time to question the attackers. Maybe this would all be resolved quickly, and he could return the device to its rightful owner. He had no idea how wrong he was. The first sign of trouble came 20 minutes later when he was climbing the stairs to his third-floor apartment. The hallway was too quiet, and the door to the unit next to his was slightly ajar. His neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, never left her door open. She was paranoid about security after being burglarized 2 years ago. Marcus approached his own door cautiously, keys ready. The lock looked normal, but something felt off. He had a habit of leaving his keychain hanging in a specific way when he locked the door, a quirk left over from his days working in IT security. The chain was hanging differently. Someone had been inside his apartment. Marcus backed away from the door and pulled out his phone to call the police. As he did, he heard footsteps in the stairwell below. Multiple sets of feet, moving up toward his floor with the kind of coordinated quiet that suggested training. They had found him already. Marcus ran toward the roof access, taking the stairs two at a time. Behind him, he could hear doors opening and closing as the searchers checked each floor. His building was old, with thick walls and multiple ways to move between floors. If he could make it to the roof, there was a fire escape on the backside that would let him get to the alley behind the building. As he climbed, Marcus tried to process what was happening. Less than an hour ago, he had been a normal guy heading home from work. Now he was running from professional operatives who had somehow tracked him to his home address in record time. The device in his pocket seemed to grow heavier with each step. Whatever information it contained was worth a lot to someone, and they were willing to break into apartments and chase people across rooftops to get it. Marcus made it to the roof, just as he heard voices in the hallway below. "Third floor's clear. Check the roof access." The rain was coming down harder now, making the rooftop slippery and treacherous. Marcus could see the fire escape on the far side, but he would have to cross 30 feet of open space to reach it. If the searchers made it to the roof before he got across, he would be completely exposed. He ran anyway. The sound of the roof access door bursting open came just as Marcus reached the fire escape. "There!" someone shouted behind him. "East side." Marcus didn't look back. He swung over the edge of the building and started climbing down the metal ladder as fast as he dared in the rain. Above him, he could hear at least 2 people moving across the roof. The alley below was narrow and filled with dumpsters and delivery trucks. Marcus dropped the last few feet and immediately started looking for a way out. The alley connected to 2 different streets, and he chose the one that would take him away from his apartment building. As he ran through the rain-soaked streets of Seattle, Marcus realized that his life, as he knew it, was over. Whatever was on the device in his pocket had made him a target, and these people had resources that far exceeded anything a normal citizen could handle. He needed to find a man who had given him the device. The distinguished gentleman with the military bearing was the only person who might be able to explain what was happening and how to make it stop. But first, Marcus needed to figure out how to survive the night. The men chasing him were professionals, and they had already proven they could track him down with frightening efficiency. Marcus ducked into a 24-hour diner and ordered coffee, trying to look casual while his mind raced. He needed a plan, and he needed help. But who could he trust? Anyone he contacted might be putting themselves in danger, and he had no way of knowing how far the reach of these people extended. As he sat in the fluorescent-lit booth, watching the rain streak down the windows, Marcus pulled out the device and examined it more closely. It was definitely military or government issue, with no obvious markings, but a small port that looked like it might connect to a computer. The smart thing would be to destroy it and hope the problem went away. But Marcus had a feeling that once he became a target of people this organized and resourceful, destroying their objective might just make them more determined to eliminate the witness who had seen too much. He was trapped, and the walls were closing in fast. The only way out was forward, which meant finding the man who had started this whole mess and demanding answers. Little did Marcus know that the distinguished gentleman he was looking for was Admiral Robert Hayes, recently retired from naval intelligence, and the device contained information that certain people would kill to keep secret. The chase that had begun on a rainy Seattle street was about to become a cross-country hunt that would test everything Marcus thought he knew about courage, survival, and the price of doing the right thing. Marcus spent the next 3 days learning how to be invisible. He paid cash for everything, stayed in different motels each night, and avoided using his phone or credit cards. The device remained tucked in his jacket pocket, a constant reminder of how quickly a normal life could disappear. On the 4th morning, he finally got a break. Using a computer at the public library, Marcus had been searching news reports about the incident downtown. Most articles mentioned a disturbance near Pioneer Square, but gave few details. However, one small item in the business section caught his attention. Former Naval Intelligence Officer Robert Hayes reported missing, read the headline. The article was brief, mentioning that Admiral Hayes had failed to appear for a scheduled meeting with defense contractors and that his family was concerned for his safety. Marcus now had a name, and, more importantly, he had confirmation that the man who gave him the device was exactly what he had suspected: military intelligence. But the fact that Hayes was reported missing meant that either he was hiding or the people chasing Marcus had already found him. That afternoon, Marcus made a decision that probably saved his life. Instead of trying to contact Hayes directly, he decided to reach out to someone who might be able to help both of them. Using an encrypted email service from another library computer, he sent a carefully worded message to a reporter named Sarah Martinez, who had written several articles about military whistleblowers. I have information about Admiral Robert Hayes and why he disappeared. If you want the story of a lifetime, meet me at Pike Place Market tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone and watch for surveillance. Marcus had no way of knowing if the reporter would take him seriously, but he was running out of options. The men hunting him were getting closer. Twice in the past day, he had spotted the same faces in different locations. They were methodical, checking every hotel and motel in the city. The next afternoon, Marcus positioned himself near the fish market with a clear view of the main entrance. Sarah Martinez turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who arrived exactly on time and spent 10 minutes checking to make sure she wasn't followed before approaching the meeting spot. "Are you the person who contacted me?" she asked quietly, pretending to examine the seafood display. "Admiral Hayes gave me something right before he disappeared," Marcus replied, matching her casual tone. "Something that people are willing to kill for." Sarah's expression sharpened. "What kind of something?" Marcus pulled out the device, just enough for her to see it. "I think it's some kind of data storage. Military grade. But I can't access it without the right equipment. And you think whatever's on there explains why Hayes disappeared? I know it does. The men who were after him are now after me. They found my apartment within hours. Sarah, these aren't ordinary criminals." Sarah studied Marcus's face, clearly trying to decide if he was legitimate or crazy. "What do you want from me?" "Help finding Hayes. And when this is over, you get the exclusive story. But right now, I need someone who knows how to investigate things like this without getting killed." "Why should I believe you?" Marcus was about to answer when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. 2 men in casual clothes had entered the market and were moving through the crowd in a systematic pattern. One of them spoke briefly into a concealed microphone. Because they just found us, Marcus said quietly. When I say go, walk normally toward the back exit. Don't run, don't look back. Sarah followed his gaze and saw what he was seeing. Oh God, are those them? Go. Now. They separated and moved in different directions through the crowded market. Marcus watched Sarah disappear toward the rear of the building while he headed for a side exit. Behind him, the two searchers had realized they had been spotted and were moving faster. Marcus made it to the street and immediately started walking away from the market area. He had arranged to meet Sarah later at a backup location, but first he needed to lose his tail. The afternoon crowd downtown provided good cover, and Marcus had spent the past few days learning the layout of the area around Pike Place. He ducked into a department store and quickly made his way to the elevator. On the third floor, he found the men's clothing section and grabbed a baseball cap and a different colored jacket from the display. He left money on the counter and headed for the store's second exit. The maneuver worked. When he emerged onto the street 20 minutes later, there was no sign of his pursuers. But Marcus knew the reprieve was temporary. Somehow, they had tracked him to the market, which meant either his communication with Sarah had been intercepted or they were monitoring her as well. That evening, Marcus met Sarah at a small coffee shop in Capitol Hill. She had clearly been shaken by the afternoon's events, but her reporter instincts were fully engaged. I did some checking, she said quietly. Robert Hayes wasn't just any intelligence officer. He was involved in some very sensitive operations over the past few years. The kind that don't make it into official records. What kind of operations? Arms deals that went wrong. Missing funds from defense contracts. There are rumors that Hayes discovered something that could embarrass some very powerful people, both in the military and in the defense industry. Marcus felt the device in his pocket like a lead weight. So whatever's on here could bring down important people. Important enough to hire professional killers to get it back. Marcus, you're in way over your head. These aren't just corporate thugs. I think you're dealing with people who have government connections. Then what do? I can't go to the police if the people after me have official backing. Sarah leaned forward. We find Hayes. He's the only one who can explain what's really on that device and how to use it safely. But first, we need to access the data and see what we're dealing with. How do we do that without specialized equipment? I know someone, a tech specialist who used to work for the NSA. He owes me a favor, and he has the kind of equipment that can read military-grade storage devices. Marcus wanted to trust Sarah, but the events of the past few days had made him paranoid about everyone. How do I know this isn't a trap? Because if I were working with them, you'd already be dead. These people don't seem interested in taking prisoners. She had a point. Marcus made his decision. Okay, but we do this my way. I choose when and where we meet your contact. 2 days later, they met Sarah's friend Danny at his cluttered apartment near the University of Washington. Danny was a thin man in his 40s who looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. His living room was filled with computer equipment that hummed quietly in the background. Military-grade storage device? Danny said, examining the device under a magnifying glass. This is serious hardware. Whoever made this didn't want the data to be easily accessed. Can you read it? Marcus asked. Maybe, but it's going to take some time, and there's a risk that trying to access it incorrectly could wipe the data entirely. How long? Give me 12 hours. Come back tomorrow night, and I should have something for you. Marcus didn't like leaving the device, but he had no choice. He and Sarah left Danny's apartment and agreed to meet the next evening at a different location. That night, Marcus barely slept. He kept thinking about Admiral Hayes and wondering if the man was still alive. If the information on the device was as dangerous as everyone seemed to think, Hayes might be the only person who could help Marcus navigate the situation safely. The next evening, when they returned to Danny's apartment, they found the door unlocked and the place torn apart. Danny was sitting in his kitchen with a black eye and a split lip, looking terrified. They came about 2 hours after you left, he said quietly. 3 men. Professional. They asked about you too and about the device. Marcus felt sick. Did they take it? No, I hid it before they arrived. But they made it very clear that if I help you again, they will be back to finish the conversation. Danny led them to a hidden compartment behind his refrigerator and pulled out the device along with a printed report. I managed to partially decrypt the contents before they showed up. What's on here is explosive. Sarah grabbed the papers and started reading. Her face went white. Marcus, this contains evidence of illegal arms sales, money laundering, and assassination contracts. All of it involving high-ranking military officials and defense contractors. How high-ranking? Marcus asked. Pentagon level. And some of the contracts are recent, like within the past 6 months recent. Danny packed the device and the printouts into a waterproof case. You need to get this to someone who can do something with it. And you need to do it fast. These people aren't going to stop hunting you. And they're getting desperate. Any idea where Hayes might be hiding? According to the files, Hayes has a cabin in the mountains near Snoqualmie Pass. It's registered under a false name, but the location is mentioned in some of his personal notes that were on the device. Marcus took the case and looked at Sarah. This is where we part ways. They know about you now, which means you're in danger too. I'm not abandoning this story, Marcus. This could be the biggest military corruption scandal in decades, and it could get you killed. Sarah shook her head firmly. I've been investigating stories like this for 10 years. I know how to protect myself. Besides, you're going to need backup when you find Hayes. These people have been hunting him for longer than they've been hunting you. As they left Danny's apartment, Marcus realized that Sarah was right about needing backup. The men chasing him were professionals with resources he couldn't match. But Hayes had been evading them for days, which meant the Admiral knew how to stay hidden. The question was whether Hayes would trust Marcus when he finally found him, or whether the old soldier would see him as another threat to eliminate. The drive to the mountains would take them away from the city and into isolated territory where help would be hours away if things went wrong. Marcus had gone from being a simple software engineer to carrying evidence that could destroy careers and possibly bring down parts of the military establishment. As they drove through the night towards Snoqualmie Pass, Marcus wondered if he would live long enough to see justice done, or if he was driving toward his own grave in the mountains. The cabin was exactly where Danny's research had indicated it would be, tucked away on a dead-end Forest Service road about 40 miles east of Seattle. Marcus and Sarah had driven through the night, taking a roundabout route to make sure they weren't followed. The early morning mist hung between the tall evergreens like ghostly curtains, and the silence was so complete it felt unnatural after days in the city. Marcus approached the cabin cautiously while Sarah waited in the car with the engine running. The building looked abandoned from the outside, with no lights visible and no smoke from the chimney. But there were recent tire tracks in a muddy driveway, and Marcus could see that someone had been cutting firewood recently. Admiral Hayes? Marcus called out when he was still 20 feet from the front door. My name is Marcus Chun. I have something that belongs to you. The response came from behind him. Turn around slowly and keep your hands visible. Marcus turned to find Admiral Hayes emerging from the tree line with a hunting rifle pointed in his direction. The distinguished gentleman from the street looked different now. Thinner, more weathered, with the kind of alert wariness that comes from days of running and hiding. You're the young man from downtown, Hayes said, his voice carefully neutral. I was hoping you had disposed of what I gave you and forgotten the whole thing. I tried to find you so I could return it. But some very dangerous people have been hunting me ever since that day. I think they killed someone who tried to help me. Hayes lowered the rifle slightly. Show me. Marcus carefully pulled out the waterproof case and opened it to reveal the device and Danny's printed analysis. We managed to partially decrypt the contents. Admiral, what you gave me contains evidence of corruption at the highest levels of the military. Hayes studied the printouts for several minutes, his face growing grimmer with each page. How many people have seen this? Just 3 of us. But one of them was beaten up by your friends yesterday. They're not my friends, son. They're the people I've been trying to expose for the past 2 years. The device contains evidence of an illegal operation called Project Blackwater. It involves selling advanced military weapons to foreign buyers without congressional approval and using the profits to fund black operations that Congress would never sanction. Sarah had approached quietly during their conversation, and Hayes noticed her for the first time. "Who is she?" "Sarah Martinez, investigative reporter. She's been helping me try to understand what's happening." Hayes shook his head. "This keeps getting worse. Every person who knows about this is now a target. They've already killed 2 other people who tried to expose the operation." "Then, why did you give the device to me?" Marcus asked. "Because they were closing in, and I needed to get the evidence to someone they wouldn't immediately suspect. I thought you would turn it over to the authorities and let them handle it. I never intended for you to become personally involved." Sarah stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, turning this over to the authorities might not be enough. If the corruption goes as high as these documents suggest, some of the authorities might be compromised." "What do you propose?" Hayes asked. "We go public. Full media exposure. Make the evidence so widely known that they can't suppress it or eliminate all the witnesses." Hayes was quiet for a long moment, scanning the tree line around the cabin. "There's something you both need to understand. The people behind Project Blackwater aren't just corrupt officials looking to make money. They believe they're protecting national security by operating outside normal oversight. In their minds, they're patriots who are doing necessary work that squeamish politicians won't approve. That doesn't make what they're doing legal," Marcus pointed out. "No, but it makes them extremely dangerous. They have access to military resources, intelligence networks, and trained operatives. And they're convinced that what they're doing is more important than the lives of a few civilians who stumble across their operation." As if to prove his point, the sound of helicopter rotors began echoing through the forest. Hayes immediately went into combat mode, grabbing his rifle and a backpack that had been hidden near the cabin's front door. "How did they find us?" Sarah asked, panic creeping into her voice. "Same way they found everything else," Hayes replied grimly. "They have resources we can't match and connections we can't anticipate. Move. Now." The 3 of them ran toward the car as the helicopter's sound grew louder. Behind them, Marcus could see a black aircraft approaching through the trees, flying low and fast. This wasn't a police helicopter. It was military, and it was coming straight for the cabin. "The car won't outrun a helicopter," Hayes said as they reached the vehicle. "We need to get into the thick forest where it can't land." They abandoned the car and plunged into the woods, following a deer trail that led up the mountainside. Behind them, the helicopter circled the cabin area, and Marcus could hear vehicles approaching on the access road. The operation to capture them was large and well-coordinated. "There's an old mining camp about 2 miles up this trail," Hayes said as they climbed. "We can reach it before they organize a proper ground search." The next hour was the longest of Marcus's life. They climbed steadily through dense forest, trying to stay quiet while moving as fast as possible. Several times, they heard helicopters passing overhead, but the thick canopy of evergreens provided cover. When they finally reached the abandoned mining camp, Hayes led them to a concrete structure that had been built into the hillside. This was a powder storage bunker back in the 1940s. The walls are 3 feet thick, and there's only one entrance. Inside the bunker, Hayes lit a small camping lantern and spread out a topographic map of the area. "We have maybe an hour before they organize search teams to cover this whole area. We need a plan that gets this evidence to someone who can act on it quickly." Sarah pulled out a satellite phone. "I can contact my editor and several other journalists simultaneously. If we can transmit the key documents to multiple news outlets at once, they won't be able to suppress the story. The transmission will give away our location," Hayes warned. "Then we make the transmission and immediately move to a new position," Marcus suggested. "How long do you need to send the files?" 10 minutes, maybe 15 for all the critical documents." Hayes studied the map again. "There's a logging road on the other side of this ridge. If we can reach it, there are multiple routes back to civilization. But it's a 2-hour hike through rough terrain." They spent the next few minutes deciding which documents were absolutely critical to expose the corruption. Hayes had intimate knowledge of the project and could identify the most damaging evidence, while Sarah knew which types of proof would be most convincing to the public. As Sarah began the transmission process, Marcus and Hayes took turns watching the entrance to the bunker. The forest outside was quiet, but too quiet. The normal sounds of birds and small animals had stopped, which usually meant that humans were moving through the area. "Transmission complete," Sarah announced. "The files are now in the hands of editors at 5 major news outlets. Whatever happens to us, the story is going to come out." Hayes nodded grimly. "Then, let's make sure we survive to see it published." They packed quickly and prepared to leave the bunker, but as Hayes opened the heavy door, they could hear voices in the distance. The search teams had found the mining camp. "Back door," Marcus asked hopefully. "This bunker was designed to contain explosions, not to provide escape routes," Hayes replied. "We're going to have to go out the front and hope we can slip past them in the dark." As they waited for full darkness, Hayes shared more details about Project Blackwater and the people behind it. The operation had started as a legitimate classified program, but had gradually evolved into something that violated multiple laws and treaties. When Hayes had tried to report the corruption through official channels, he had been threatened and eventually forced to steal the evidence to prove his claims. "The worst part," Hayes said quietly, "is that some of the weapons sold through this program have already been used against American forces overseas. We're literally arming our own enemies for profit." When full darkness finally arrived, they slipped out of the bunker and began moving carefully toward the logging road. The forest was full of searchers now, but they were using lights and moving in formation, which made them easy to avoid. It took 3 hours to reach the logging road, and another hour to hike to where it connected with a paved highway. By dawn, they were in the small town of North Bend, where Sarah rented a motel room, and they waited to see how the media would handle the story. The first articles appeared online within hours, and by afternoon, every major news outlet was running stories about Project Blackwater. The evidence was so compelling and well documented that even government officials couldn't dismiss it as false information. Within a week, congressional hearings had been announced, and several high-ranking officials had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The men who had been hunting Marcus and Hayes suddenly found themselves under federal investigation, and the immediate physical threat disappeared. Marcus returned to Seattle to find that his apartment had been cleaned and his belongings carefully returned to their original positions. Someone had even left an envelope on his kitchen table containing a formal letter of apology from a government agency he had never heard of. 6 months later, Marcus testified before a congressional committee about his experiences, helping to provide the civilian perspective on how the corruption had affected ordinary people. Admiral Hayes was vindicated and became a key witness in the prosecution of the officials involved in Project Blackwater. Sarah Martinez won a Pulitzer Prize for her reporting on the scandal, and she made sure that Marcus's role in exposing the corruption was properly recognized. Marcus returned to his job as a software engineer, but he was a different person now. He had learned that ordinary people sometimes get caught up in extraordinary circumstances, and that doing the right thing can come with costs nobody anticipates. He also learned that sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, taking action anyway can make all the difference. The device that had started everything was eventually returned to proper military custody, but not before its contents had changed the careers of dozens of officials and led to new oversight procedures designed to prevent similar corruption in the future. Years later, Marcus would sometimes think about that rainy Tuesday evening when he decided to help a stranger being attacked on the street. It had been the most terrifying period of his life, but also the most important. Sometimes being a hero means accepting that your life will never be the same, and that the price of doing what's right is higher than anyone should have to pay. But sometimes it's worth it anyway.